Hello chess fans, this is Rick from Chess to Impress. There are 3 rounds to go in Norway Chess 2018 and this is coverage of round 7. These were the pairings. Magnus Carlsen had an extra day off after Ding's accident, operation and withdrawal from the tournament. Mamedyarov played a draw against Wesley So. Karana and Nakamura, the all-US clash, also ended in a draw, and so did Karyakin versus Aronyan. And that leaves the game, Vachier Lagrave versus the great Vishwanathan Anand. Let's have a look at that game. This is a picture from during the game of the French Grandmaster Maxime Vachier Lagrave. And here we see the legend, that is Vishwanathan Anand. Let's go into it. Vachier Lagrave is white, Anand is black. It's the 5th of June 2018. e4 from Vachier Lagrave. Anand played e5. Knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5, the Spanish opening, a6, bishop a4, knight f6, Vachier Lagrave castled, and Anand plays the open Spanish, not something that it has been part of his repertoire lately. It must have come as a surprise for Vachier Lagrave. We get the main line, d4, b5, bishop back, and d5. D takes e5, bishop e6, all played thousands of times before, c3, and now bishop c5 is the main theoretical move. The other one was played by Anand in this game, bishop e7. Knight bd2, black castled, and bishop c2 is now the main move. But Vachier Lagrave played rook e1, a less common move. But it had been played before. Knight c5, and now bishop c2 is a move, but knight d4 was played by Vachier Lagrave. The knight was taken, c takes, knight d3, attacking the rook on e1. Rook went to e3, attacking the knight, and the knight went to f4. Vachier Lagrave said in his interview after the game that he was supposed to be somewhat better here, he thought, and he said that c5 is now a threat for black. He played knight f3, bishop g4. Vachier Lagrave said here that it's getting double-edged. He kicked the bishop, bishop went back to h5, and he played rook c3 on the half-open file. Knight e6 from Anand, and Anand said that he really likes his knight on e6. It's holding my position together nicely, but on its own is not enough. For example, when a rook to c6, that knight might become undermined. Vachier Lagrave kicked the bishop again, bishop g6, bishop e3, and a5. Here Vachier Lagrave played bishop c2. He said he could have gone for rook ac1 instead, but he did not like the position at the end of this long variation. c5. Then d takes c5, this is what Vachier Lagrave calculated. b4, rook 3 to c2, and that will cost white an exchange, but the rook did not have any squares, not any safe squares. Bishop takes c2, rook takes c2, d4. White will win the black d pawn anyway. Bishop takes d4. a4, and bishop takes e6, f takes e6, and Vachier Lagrave said he could not evaluate this position from afar. It turns out he was right. This is not a good variation for white. Black is better here. So all this after a5 and then rook ac1, but Vachier Lagrave played bishop c2. Bishop b4 from Anand, hitting the rook. Rook has only one safe square on b3. It's not very safe, but for the moment it's safe. And f5. Vasiljev said that he now quickly has to consolidate his kingside as black is getting strong counterplay after f5. He felt he had to take the pawn en passant. Anand took on c2, queen takes, and he took the pawn back on f6 with the queen. Now the knight is hanging. Knight e5 was played by Vasiljev, and Anand played c5. Poor Simon Achtestein, Norwegian Grandmaster, was commenting on this game in the live broadcast, and he found it very tough. This is a very complex game. He said here that it is a big mess. And Anand now sacrifices an exchange. And it was called by both players an automatic exchange sacrifice. With knight d7, white will win an exchange, as we'll see. Black will very likely get the exchange back though, because of the trapped rook on b3. So it's not that much of a risk that black is taking by sacrificing material. So knight d7 was played. Queen f7. Knight takes f8. Rook takes. And here Vasiljev made a mistake. He said afterwards he should have played a3. He said this move was a must. And then the variation goes as follows. c4. A takes b4. C takes b3, winning the exchange back. And queen c6. And both players agreed that this was equal. But Vasiljev did not play a3, he played queen f5. And that's not a good move. Anand took on d4. The queens were swapped. And again, Vasiljev should have played a3 here. He did not do that. After a3, these were the variations that were looked at in the press conference after the game. Knight c5, said Anand. And then rook takes b4, a takes b4, and bishop takes d4 is the variation that Vasiljev showed. And Anand's reaction was, oh, this is just equal, isn't it? And it is indeed. The engine agrees. They also looked at a3 and then instead of knight c5 play d takes e3. Then a takes b4, take that bishop. Black takes on f2 with check. King f1 and then a4. Vasiljev thought this was bad for white, but it turns out it's not so bad. White is better here. So all this after rook takes f7 and then a3, which was the right move to play. But Vasiljev made another mistake. He took on b4 with the rook. He had missed the move, as we'll see. A takes b4 was played by Anand. And now white is to save his bishop. Bishop d2. And here's the move that Vasiljev had missed. He had missed b3. And that's very strong. Black has a very good position now. You cannot play something like a3 because then the rook swings over to c7. Threatens to come in to c2. Black is winning here. So after b3, Vasiljev had to take the pawn. And now black's rook infiltrates into white's position. Rook f3. Attacking two pawns. There was a funny moment in the press conference. Anand said that for a split second he thought that instead of rook f3 that knight c5 might have been winning. Well, it is winning, but not for black. It is actually white who wins here. If you want to look for yourself, it's not very difficult. White can play rook a8 check. You only have one move. That rook gets taken. King takes f8. And we have bishop b4. And because of the pin, white will win the knight and this game. So back to the game, rook f3. Of course, Anand saw in another split second that knight c5 would have been a blunder. b4 was the best that Vachier-Lagrave could come up with, and here taking the pawn on h3 is good, but Anand first played rook d3, hitting the bishop. Rook e1, counter-attacking the knight. Anand defends the knight with king f7, brings the king closer as well. Vachier-Lagrave saves his bishop, which goes now to a passive square, and Anand takes the pawn. Rook e5, rook d3, and the threat is now rook d1, winning the bishop. So Vachier-Lagrave had to play king f1. Rook d1 check came anyway. The rook interposed. The rooks were swapped. g6, f4, and Anand played his knight back to d8, rerouting the knight. Fabiano Caruana and Hikaru Nakamura were asked about this position in their press conference when they had finished their game, and Nakamura saw the position and immediately said, "This should be winning for black with the outside pawn." He meant the h-pawn. He saw that the knight is stronger than the bishop and that black will get an outside passed pawn. Caruana said that there's also an option of knight c6, and the knight guards everything, Caruana said, and Caruana agreed that black should play for pushing his h-pawn. And that's probably why Vachier-Lagrave played g5 to take that option out of the equation. If the h-pawn moves, then white can take it. It was move 40, and the 40th move of Anand was king e6 on its way to f5. That square is now weakened by the g4, g5 push. And Vachier-Lagrave immediately resigned. He saw that he cannot hold this endgame. It's not so obvious straight away. Of course, black is a pawn up, and his knight will dominate the bishop, and his king will get more active than white's king. But how easy is it to win? Well, the engine thinks it's very easy. The engine is on -4, and Anand would have had no problem in converting this. But just to show you, I'll give you one variation, just the main variation of the engine, or one of the variations, to see how hopeless this is for white. So here the game was finished. Vachier-Lagrave resigned. He could have played king e2. Then black goes to f5. Good square for the king. King f3. Knight e6. And now white has to keep protecting the f4 pawn with both his pieces, because it's attacked by both king and knight. So bishop d2 makes sense, but then there's a way to make progress for black. He can play d3, bishop e3. There's nothing white can do but to make waiting moves. d4, bishop back, and then the knight gets rerouted to d5, knight c7. Again, this is just an example. Bishop c1, there's nothing better to do for white. Knight d5, bishop d2, and then knight e3 is one of the moves that wins. Taking on e3 does not work, and moving the bishop, for example, to e1 does not work either, because there is knight c4. Not only threatening to take on b2, you can try to kick the knight, but then d2 wins the game. You have to give your bishop for the d-pawn. Again, this was just one example. There were other ways of winning, but here in this example you can see how easily black can win his position, especially in the hands of a super grandmaster. So it's understandable that after king e6, Vachier-Lagrave threw in the towel. Big win for Anand, and he's joining the leaders on +1. So these are the final results of round 7. We had 3 draws and a win with black from Anand over Vachier-Lagrave. The the first black win in this tournament. The standings, it's heating up at the top of the ranking. We have now 3 players with +1. Carlsen, So and Anand. Aronjan on 50%. He also has 3.5 points, but he has played 1 game extra. Of course, the table looks messy because of Dingley Ren having to withdraw, and that means that not all players have played the same number of games. Karyakin, Nakamura and Caruana are also on 50%. Mamedyarov is on -1, and Vachier-Lagrave is having a bad tournament. He is on -2. Round 8 will be played on Wednesday, the 6th of June. And we'll see Nakamura against Karyakin, Anand, Caruana, So, Vachier-Lagrave and Carlsen, Mamedyarov. All 3 leaders will have the white pieces. I will be here after the round to tell you all about it. Hope you liked the video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and please subscribe to the Chess to Impress channel. I'm almost at 20,000 subscribers. I hope you can get me there. Please leave a comment. I will read them all and I will reply to them all. And you also may want to check my Chess to Progress channel. The link is in the description box. This is Rick for Chess to Impress. Thank you for watching.